because, my God, they deserve it. But the John Calipari message of video to the fans at Kentucky, Big Blue Nation, that he feels like they need a new voice. He probably needs to refresh himself. He is gone. We're going to get into the coaching search here in a moment, but still kind of hard to imagine. But he had been there 15 years. That's a long stretch for pretty much anybody.
Yeah, it is, especially, when coaches make as much as they do now, and, how, ineffective he's been at, finishing the job as the coach. And some of those, things may be fair or not fair, but he was getting paid a lot of money at Kentucky to get them into the Final Four, and that hasn't happened in a very long time. So, yeah, maybe he needs a fresh spot and a fresh voice and all that. So, I don't know. I
still thought that this would turn around in a boomerang style, that somehow or another it would not happen. I'm happy for Arkansas, because Eric Musselman was a pretty good coach despite this year, but I'm glad it's worked out for the Arkansas Razorbacks fans. They're a great basketball fan base too.
Yeah, I think it's just nice to have some finality to at least one part of this. No more speculating like the last 24 hours over whether he's actually leaving or not. Now we know for a fact he's leaving. No more speculation about what he's trying to do behind the scenes. And man, it's so hard to sort through what's what. I mean, nowadays it's just so unchecked on what information is clear, so you really have to be careful as usual. But I just saw so many different things flying about it, and so I don't even know what's true as far as what he was trying to work behind the scenes with his deal. The last thing that I saw was that apparently he had gone to Mitch Barnhart in Kentucky and said, like, hey, here's the offer that I've got, match it.
That's from a longtime Kentucky broadcaster.
Yeah, so that's the last thing that I had seen, and then basically Kentucky and Mitch Barnhart said, no, see ya, and he's off to Arkansas, and it's official now with that video being his goodbye letter to Big Blue Nation. So at least we know that part of it is official now, and we can move on from the, oh, shoot, has he got 1 foot in and he's about to take it back out and stay at Kentucky because we haven't heard anything. Now we know the deal there, and a massive coaching search starts. But, yeah, it's a great hire by Arkansas. I mean, the clear thing here is he was facing a lot of pressure moving forward because they've not been as successful as they should have been, given all of the resources, given the head coach, given the players, given the backing. And he saw the clock ticking or the seat warming and thought, hey, I'll just reset entirely. Still in the SEC, can bring players at will because of the transfer portal, and I'll just go set it back to zero and go sit on down in a nice, cool seat that's going to have a lot of pressure attached to it as well, but not nearly what he would have had in Lexington this year. No. So, I mean, it's a smart move on his part, and he's none the worse for wear. And Kentucky will be fine, but, like we said, there's a big coaching search coming up.
I just saw this, and there's more than one handful. We'll have, by the way, today at 4, Wes Moore, who's the one that popped the story on Sunday afternoon about Calipari in Arkansas. He's out of Little Rock, Fox 16, and also the Buzz radio station in Little Rock. He'll join us today at 4 o'clock. A lot of reporters now saying that he will not be officially announced until tomorrow morning. Introductory press conference sometime tomorrow evening at the Bud Walton Arena. And Arkansas fans are like, what the hell? He's already done a video that he's moving on. And I don't know if it's a legal thing or if something that has to go through the Board of Regents. Juracek, who obviously did a great job from Musselman to now Calipari, has not put anything out there. But that is tomorrow. Today's day is about Calipari leaving Kentucky, but so was yesterday and even a lot on Sunday. So Nate Oates, his name was brought up as a possible candidate. He put out a note yesterday, fully committed to this team. Talked about the university, talked about Alabama, wants to win its first national championship in men's basketball. Despite any rumors to the contrary, rest assured, I will continue the pursuit as your head coach. So, and roll tide. Craig, how do you say it?
Roll Tide.
Roll Tide. Now, also, Greg Byrne, the AD at Alabama, then followed up with a tweet discussing and making sure that Alabama's fans understood NIL. And by the way, that can help too as they now move on after their great run this year. That's from our good friend Pat Smith. So then I asked this question amongst myself. So if Nate Oates is putting out a statement, last night after winning back-to-back national titles, Dan Hurley made it clear.
I mean, Nate Oates, I just want to say, brilliant on the part of Alabama. Was he even going to be the guy?
Yeah.
Was he the top 5 candidate? Was he a top 10 candidate? I'm sure he was high up on the list, but I'm just saying, brilliant on Alabama's part to go ahead and say, no, he's going to turn down Kentucky and turn down Kentucky to stay here at Alabama and build it here. And I just think that was a good play on the part of the Tide to present it like that.
And Dan Hurley made it clear last night that they have the resources at UConn to continue to do what they do every March and April after winning their 6th national title. We'll get to some more of the details on that. So then I said, so what about Scott Drew's name that's out there? We've heard it. It's been out there. A lot of national writers has put his name out there. We had Ashley Hodge to discuss it yesterday. So I asked somebody at Baylor administration about the concerns because it is Kentucky. I think, sure, Kentucky is like Alabama football. If you've got a coach who is really good at any place that's not quite the top 1% place, then you're concerned. So then I asked, okay, what about a statement? I love this response. I think on the statement thing, I think there's a lot more reason for guys who have changed jobs every 3 or 4 years to put out statements that they're not going compared to a guy that's been here or in the same job for 21 years.
Yeah, I do think it's funny how all these things happen now. I'm not going to credit him completely with this, but Dan Lanning in Oregon, when he got out in front of that Alabama thing, and then Alabama kind of stealing that same deal or using that same tactic with Nate Oates. Yeah, I'm not involved in this. And then Mitch Barnhart, I'm sure he's been thinking about it, but he might be thinking well, yeah, I know you're not because I wasn't going to call you, but all right. I mean, thanks for making it easier on me to not have to answer, hey, what did you ever call Nate Oates? I mean, you take yourself out of that. But, yeah, the Kentucky search is going to be.
He said they're going to find somebody to continue or move the tradition forward. He did put out a quote about that earlier today.
And it's going to be very, very interesting who comes out of the woodwork that wants it or who they go after that. Maybe you wouldn't publicly say that they were looking for it, but, and again, right now, there's a Vegas sports book that is giving 1-to-1 odds on Scott Drew. I think that's a little bit too generous or too sure of a thing. Now that's not to say it's impossible, but 1-to-1 is kind of
1-to-1 compared to everybody else is a heavy favorite.
Yeah.
And Vegas does that for betting. They also usually know some things. I continue to be told that Baylor knows what's going on. Of course, they're not dumb, but that they feel pretty good about Scott Drew. They feel good about Scott Drew staying where he is in Waco.
Yeah, I mean, I understand the whole not putting out a statement thing. If he did that, he would have already had to have put one out a couple weeks ago with the Louisville job, and maybe even another one this offseason. I don't even recall now what all jobs have been open, but at least one 2 weeks ago, we would have seen a graphic.
He could have, Arkansas before this even
put
happened,
out a graphic
or
for
USC
Arkansas,
or whoever.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, how many times are you going to do that? And so I do think that if you were going to start that trend, this would be the job to do it, though. If you're Scott Drew, if you really want to calm people's fears, then this would be the situation, because this is the first time I think you actually feel threatened, honestly. Louisville never appeared to be much of a threat. All due respect to their tradition and history, that's what they were actually banking on being the pull for him. And I'm sure a little bump in NIL maybe, or this or that they felt like was a pull for Scott Drew to leave the gig that he has here. But I don't think any of us felt that it was ever that serious. And I said time and time again, sure, I could see him leaving if he just wants to do something different. But beyond that reason, there is no reason for him to take the Louisville job over the Baylor job. The Kentucky job, that's a little bit different, guys. That is Alabama football.
Well, that's what that's
what I was saying yesterday. And so that is different. That is a real deal, big-time threat. And that is one that I think you have to take very seriously and really acknowledge and think about being the one that could pull him away potentially. So I think everybody's on board that that's the case, and now just waiting with bated breath, hopefully not holding their breath too tight because we don't know how long this is going to take. But I based on Mitch Barnhart's response of okay, see ya, it seems like they've already got far down the road with whoever they think they're probably going to get. Now, they might still have a choice of folks, but it doesn't sound like they're concerned about getting turned down by many people based on okay, see you, Cal. We need a fresh start. You need a fresh start. we'll see you at the crossroads. So that was not revealing, but just interesting to me of how sure they were about moving on. And I assumed that to be feeling pretty good about who they're going to land or where they are in that whole process. So, yeah, I mean, Scott Drew's front and center. Every person attached to basketball who was at the game last night says, like, he's the name that's being bandied about the most. Well, after, obviously Dan Hurley saying, I'm not going to be the guy, and Nate Oates saying he's not going to be the guy. Again, that was just a brilliant PR tactic by him in Alabama, because we don't know how realistic that would have been. Hurley, we can say, like, yeah, of course they'd be interested in Dan Hurley.
Yeah.
He's only won the last 2 national titles, so that one, for sure. But, yeah, I mean, it's a very interesting time now, because this does feel different than the other several jobs that have popped open over the years that Scott Drew's been rumored to be involved with. I still lean towards him staying at Baylor, but I'm very aware that this could go a different route because of the job that we're talking. So I think you just got to be prepared for every instance here and not be too confident this is just going to be the same old thing where eventually he's just back in Waco.
Well, the biggest difference between Louisville and Kentucky is that Louisville is at the bottom and Kentucky is inexplicably in the middle, or towards the lower end of the top, in that they're getting recruits that other coaches would crawl across hot coals, broken glass, like in a hurricane, through a tornado to get to. And John Calipari's getting those guys. He's getting the guys who are NBA guys all the time, and then hitting a wall in the tournament. So Kentucky's issues are minor compared to Louisville's. Kentucky's issues are, how do we get all these great players to win a couple more games for us every year, as opposed to Louisville is, how do we get great players again? There's a chasm in that, which makes the two jobs very different when it comes to any candidate, particularly Scott Drew's view, is that Louisville looks at him as he did this great rebuild job in Waco, and man, wouldn't it be great if he could do that again, given we have way more tradition than Baylor did when he got there. But Kentucky looks at it as, well, he did this great rebuild job in Waco, and here we don't even really need a rebuild. We just need, some new plumbing in the bathrooms and some paint on the walls, and we'll be fine.
Yep. And by the way, Kentucky's a job, if any coach got the offer and left to go to Kentucky for football, like Alabama, remember now, Steve Sarkisian's name was brought up but he's at Texas, which would be like right there in that same mix of 3 to 5 schools in football, and was not going to leave Texas. But that doesn't mean that Alabama wasn't going to at least contact him and check him out because of the familiarity. Kentucky is Kentucky, as the quote said, that Kentucky in basketball is like Alabama in football. So there we are with that, and we'll just see how things work out over the next few hours, because I would think that this would not be something that would drag on too long, because it affects the programs of coaches whose names are being brought up, and also the fact that Kentucky needs to act quickly to move on to the next era of their great basketball tradition.